So we are live. How are you?
Hi, how are you? Good to be on with you, though.
Yeah, nice to be with you. Thank you so much for doing this because I know you're like an unsung hero out there working incredibly hard to protect this election. And I've been on a couple of the Zoom calls that you've been organizing, and I've been really blown away by like all these people spread out across the country trying to like hold the dam from breaking.
Yep,
So tell me
it's going to
about
be a close
that.
call.
Yeah.
Well, our call to action is this. First of all,
Mhm.
to vote, of course. This year, of course, registering and voting is not going to be enough, but it is an essential thing. So we are encouraging people to vote in person early. If you get a ballot in the mail, we want you to take it in. Don't mail it in. Walk it into the election board if you can, and have it checked before you deposit it there. Because the one of the things that the Trump people do is they get into the election boards and they throw out ballots. So you want to
Mhm.
go into the election board and you want to have your vote approved by a poll worker. In some cases, not many, but in some cases, you may actually be able to put your vote in the actual scanner. There are a couple of things that are in this election that are very good. And the main one is that because of the COVID and the switch to vote by mail, most of the ballots, and I mean as many as 90% of the ballots in this election will be on paper, which is a
Mm.
huge improvement. Since
Mhm.
2000, especially, people in this country have been voting on touchscreen machines, which we call push and pray. You have no idea where your vote goes or what happens. So if
Mhm.
you get a ballot in the mail, it's gold. And we prefer that you take it in because we know what's being done to the post office. And you can go in and you may even be able to put it in the scanner. The scanners, there's a lot of talk about when we're going to get an outcome. If most of the ballots or nearly all the ballots are on paper, they will go into scanning machines. Almost all the precincts in this country have digital scanning machines. And the paper ballots will go into the digital scanning machines and create a ballot image. And as a result of that, once all the ballots are entered into the digital scanning machines, we'll get an instant, a virtually instant outcome. So this
Mm.
idea that all the paper ballots have to be sit there and counted by hand is not true.
Mhm.
And ironically, we may get a faster outcome in this election than in any other recent election. Now,
Wow.
it's possible. It may not happen, but we don't want, of course, the narrative that you have to have an outcome on election night. That's just Trump nonsense. We need to ignore that. So the number
Mhm.
one call to action is get your ballot in the mail. If you don't get it in the mail, if you get your ballot in the mail, take it in. If you can't take it in, you may be able to have a relative bring it in. The laws vary state by state. And one thing people have to understand, this is not a national election. It's a collage of 50 state elections plus DC. Every state
Mhm.
has different laws. Every precinct has different customs or way they're going to do it. So you
Mhm.
need to know what's happening in your state and in your precinct. So
I
if
see.
you don't get your ballot, first of all, you have to check the voter rolls to make sure you're actually registered. 17 million people have been stripped from the voter rolls in this country. You could be one of them. You may think you're registered, as I thought I was in 2004. I had been in the same house for 15 years, voting in the same place, and in 2004 they told me I wasn't registered. I had to
Mm.
call the election board and get re-registered. So check your registration. Re-register if you can, if you have to. Get other people to register. If you get your ballot in the mail, congratulations, fill it out and walk it in. Now, in many cases, you won't be able to do that. You need to know. Some places will not accept your walked-in ballot. Some places don't have drop boxes. So you may have no choice but to mail it back in. But if you have the option to walk it back in, or to drop it in a drop box, do that. Mailing it back in is a third option. Like I say, you may be able to get a relative. There may be designated vote gatherers, but watch out because vote harvesting is illegal, and we've got a court case going on about that in North Carolina. Okay. Second, you have to be an election protection activist. Now, there are dozens of groups around the country that are doing this. You can come to our weekly Monday Zoom call, which is at 5 p.m. Sorry, every Monday Eastern time, goes to 6:30. We've had 16 90-minute Zoom calls about the details of the election. It is incredibly complicated and somewhat fascinating, actually. We've had as many as 100 people on the calls, very few drop off. So if you want to get onto this call, go to grassrootsep.org or email me directly at solartopia@gmail. And I will add you to the list. You'll get an application and join the call. We're going to have 7 more at least. We're going to go right through up to the election. So, and you can find out all sorts of things about your what's happening, but you need to find a group with which you're comfortable and work with them. Phone bank, do postcards, go door to door, make donations, whatever you can do. Okay, and you can get them at Grassroots EP. There's a list of allied organizations. One of the good ones is People Demanding Action. They are sending postcards into swing states. We are focusing, but you got to be active. And if you're in a swing state, you really need to be a poll worker. You can actually get paid. The election boards are paying people pretty well. You can make $11 or more an hour. It's a long day. If you're a lawyer in Ohio, they'll actually give you CLE credit. But the swing states, the key swing states, and if you're in them, we need you at the polls to be a poll worker, which is hired by the election board or a poll monitor to watch and make sure that the Trump Nazis with their guns don't show up and intimidate people, or if they do, that you're there to counteract them. The key swing states are Wisconsin.
Wait a second, Harvey, hang on a second. How do you counteract them?
You just got, these people, we're gonna have a lot of people showing up with guns at the elections polling places to intimidate people, and we need, nonviolent activists. We don't want any gun battles. We need nonviolent activists to shepherd people into the voting places. Now, in some
But
places,
if they show up with guns, what can we do about it? I don't.
have to get
I
between
understand.
them. Just have to get between them and the voters.
Uh-huh.
I mean, we're going to hope they don't start opening fire. It has happened in American history, but if Trump people are going to show up with guns at the polling stations, we need people there. They will. We need people to escort voters in. In some places, people will be voting in the big arenas. The NBA and some of the NFL stadiums, some of the hockey stadiums will be used for voting places, which is a good thing. Charlotte, Milwaukee, Cleveland, LA, DC, these arenas will be used for voting. And we need people down there through early voting. In Charlotte, the arenas will be used, the football stadium and the basketball arena will be used for early voting, but not on election day. We want people very clearly, do not wait to election day. Do not wait till November 3rd to vote. Every day from now until November 3rd is election day. We need people to vote early, get your ballots in early, and protect the polls early. Do the phone calling, do the postcards early, so that by election day, by November 3rd, we want 99% of the ballots to be in by November 3rd. That's critical. And if we can do that, we can avoid, the armed militias, and we can avoid this nonsense about a delayed vote count. It's critical. So we need people to phone bank and to protect the polls. Now,
Yeah, go ahead.
The phone banking is especially critical. If you're not in one of these states, you can phone bank. If you are in one of these states, go down and be a poll worker and do the canvassing and whatever. The key swing states are Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, where you are, Annabelle, North Carolina, Florida, and Arizona. Those are the top 6. Then there's Ohio. Ohio should be a swing state, but it is so corrupt and so different. I mean, we have people on the ground in Ohio, but it's hard. And then you have a lot of other secondary states which could go. New Hampshire, we think may be safe, but Maine has a key Senate race.
Right.
Georgia has 2 Senate races. Texas has a Senate race. Kansas, Kentucky, Montana, Iowa. These all have key Senate races.
South Carolina, Kentucky, right? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So which one are you the most worried about? Are you worried about, say, Florida the most, or I'm worried about Florida.
Florida, the top 6 are all pretty much on equal footing. Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Florida, and Arizona. Florida is the most difficult because it's the biggest of that list. But
well, and also the governor.
Yeah, we have a bad governor. We have Democratic governors, which makes a big difference in Wisconsin, Michigan, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
We have a good Secretary of State in Arizona. And we have very strong on the ground organizations. We have strong organizations on the ground now in North Carolina, Arizona, Ohio, and Michigan. We really need Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, although I know there are a lot of people in other organizations that are working in Pennsylvania. So there are people working everywhere. Those are just
okay. So let me ask you something. Could you kind of explain to us what the other side or the Trump folks are planning? What are their strategies for trying to? Nice.
Okay, I got it. Number 1 is intimidation. They will have people at the polls on election day with guns. And that's Donald Trump's father was a supporter of the Ku Klux Klan. And historically, the Klan has come out to elections with guns to scare people away. So on November 3rd, they'll be doing that. Now, they may do it also at the polls on early voting. One of the reasons that Trump hates vote by mail is because he can't get his gun people out there to intimidate voters. That's the unspoken reason that Trump doesn't like vote by mail. He wants people to have to come to the polls where his people with guns can scare them away. So that's part of the strategy. Sabotaging the Postal Service is a big deal, but that is backfiring. We're seeing in recent polls, whereas 80, 90% of the public was talking about voting by mail, people are now voting early. And they're going in now. I mean, there are reports of huge numbers of people going to the polls already, which is great. It does 2 things. First of all, it avoids the militias, and it means the votes will be on hand and can be counted much more quickly on election night. And in fact, many election boards are now processing ballots. They're not counting them, which you should not do, but they're processing the ballots so they'll be ready to go election night. And if they're on paper and if they're going into scanning machines, that's going to go pretty quickly. And you can get, like I say, a virtually instant vote count. So, that's all good. So the Trump's strategy is to create as much confusion as possible. For example, when Trump said, well, mail in your ballot and then go try to vote again. He sounds like an idiot, which he is, but it creates confusion. It's deliberate. They want confusion. They want chaos. The quickest path to fascism is chaos. And that's what we're seeing. So, that's the strategy. Chaos, confusion, destroy the post office, and create a disarray at the voting stations.
Okay, so let's take it one step at a time. Chaos and confusion. So what do we do to protect ourselves from chaos and confusion?
Get your ballots in as early as possible. Get your ballot as early as you can in the mail, and then take it in personally. If you can't do that, see if you can get somebody to take it in. There are legal possibilities for that, or else go to a drop box and get it or mail it immediately. Do not and put
Mhm.
2 stamps on it. Don't
Okay.
put they if your return envelope does not have a stamp on it, put 2 on there
Uh-huh.
because one may not do it.
Mhm.
And then and so that's number one. Voter education. You got to check the voter rolls. You got to make sure you're registered. You got to make sure your friends are registered. Do the phone banking. Do the postcards, and pick an election protection organization that you like. Join our Zoom calls on Monday to get as much clarification as you can.
Mhm. I see. Okay. So now, um, let's see. I know you're not a betting man. You probably don't go to Vegas and play the casino. I don't know, Harvey.
I'll tell you stories. I am an anti-nuclear activist. I've been working against nuclear power most of
Uh-huh.
my life, and I've actually been to Vegas many times because they want to dump the nuclear waste 80 miles from Vegas at Yucca Mountain. And
Oh,
so the
okay.
anti-nuclear movement in
Uh-huh.
Las Vegas has actually been very strong. And at least one of the casino owners is a big opponent of nuclear power. So I've actually spoken in
Uh-huh.
one of the casinos there, which is
Right.
fun.
Okay, so now then the question I have is, can you kind of predict if you were betting on the election and the outcome of the election, what do you think is likely to happen?
I think that Biden will win the popular vote substantially, and
Mm-hmm.
uh, that Trump will challenge the swing states and refuse to accept the results. And then we're going to see what.
Okay. So then,
I don't have any doubt that
mhm,
Biden will win the popular vote, especially with early voting
right.
and vote by mail.
So then, okay, then the question is, and that's kind of what's keeping me up at nights right now. What do we do if and when Trump tries to contest the outcome of the election?
Well, let me make clear. First and foremost, we have to win the election.
Yeah.
So we can't put the cart before the horse here. We've got to do
Okay.
everything we can to protect the election. Secondly, the only
Hmm.
thing that will swing it after if Trump forcefully
Hmm.
tries to keep power is a general strike. People have to just refuse to go to work and get in the streets. But it will not be decided in the streets. It will be decided in the workplace. And if the
Mm,
country shuts down, then he can't hold power. That's how it has to
right.
be. Because the
Right.
big money people won't let that happen. If we can
Mhm.
demonstrate that we can shut the country down, he will not. He will not be in. He'll
Hmm.
be gone. That's
Yeah,
the
I
only
mean,
thing he'll do.
I think calling for a work strike to me is more effective than getting out on the streets because, again, with Trump people showing up with guns,
Right,
creating violence on the streets will actually help Trump and his authoritarian following, right? It's like,
right.
oh,
Well, you have to
there's
shut.
disorder and violence, and let's shut that down.
Right. Everybody who does not go to work on November 4th or whatever it is when he tries to take power needs to be in the streets. But the important thing is to not go to work.
Hmm.
That's the critical. That's the critical thing. Except for the people who run the internet and the postal service. Ironically, the postal workers should go to work, but
Hmm.
everybody else needs to stay out. And
Yeah,
essential workers, the hospitals and stuff, they have to stay open, especially during the pandemic. But
right.
and maybe we don't want people in the streets because of the pandemic. But the important thing is that people not go to work and that the economy totally shut down until he leaves.
Hmm.
And then
Okay.
there is a history of general strikes, especially in Europe. But in the United States, we had one in Seattle in 1919. There was one in Oakland. So there have been general strikes, and they are incredibly
Uh-huh.
effective. But that's what we have to. We have to show that we have the power to shut the country down.
Hmm. I see. Okay, so we shut the country down. Trump is contesting all this absentee ballots and the mail-in ballots. He's refusing to go. He's throwing everything he can at this. There's complete sort of confusion, and people start feeling really nervous about the fate of our democracy in our country. Um, who's going to guide us through this? This seems so incredibly
Right.
just fraught with
Well, the problem
just
is,
yeah.
sorry,
No,
you're
no,
right.
I'm just wondering. We need leadership, and I'm just wondering, like, who do we turn to help guide us through this? Because part of the issue is that we don't trust institutions and people anymore. You know.
Right. Well, the problem is the Democratic Party. You know, we've had the Democratic Party. You know, the 2000. Let's do a chronological history. The
Uh-huh.
2000 election was stolen by Jeb Bush, the governor of Florida. He stripped 90,000 people off the voter rolls, and they flipped the vote count in Volusia and other counties, and then they stopped the vote count, the recount in Florida.
Hmm.
And, for the next 20 years, the Democratic Party screamed at Ralph Nader, who had nothing to do with it. If Ralph Nader had not run in 2000, Jeb Bush still would have stolen the election. And,
Hmm.
and Al Gore just caved in and conceded. It happened again in 2004. I was
Right.
living in Columbus. Bob Fitrakis, my co-writer, and I showed 100 different ways that the election was stolen.
Hmm.
And John Kerry conceded the next day, even though he allegedly lost Ohio by 119,000 votes, and there was still 250,000 that weren't counted. But he conceded the next day in Windsor. In 2016, we
Yeah.
showed how Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, certainly Michigan, possibly Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, were stolen,
Mm.
and which would have swung the election. And Hillary Clinton refused to participate in a recount. So
And explain that to me. Why do they do that?
because they're Democrats, they're corporate Democrats.
Um,
They refused to take on, whatever. I mean, who? If I can explain it, I'd get the Nobel Prize. I cannot explain why the Democratic Party refuses to, support us. The Democratic Party is way more comfortable with Donald Trump in the White House than they would be with Bernie Sanders, and so that's what we face. It happened again in last election in Florida, again, where there was a recount where there was clear reason to believe that the Democratic Senate candidate won and the Democratic governor candidate won, and yet the Democrats just folded, and in you get a Republican governor and a Republican senator. We can't have
mhm.
that happen in 2020.
So
The
I remember
guy on
it,
your shirt, Joe Biden,
yeah.
has got to be willing to
Hmm.
not concede
Hmm.
and to be part of a movement that will refuse to allow Donald Trump to steal the election. It's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a feeling that they are planning to do that now. They're not going to concede like we did in the past. I remember in 2000 when Al Gore conceded, I think his explanation was that this was for the good of the country,
Yeah,
for a peaceful
exactly right.
transition. Yeah.
No, it was absolutely inexcusable.
Uh-huh.
He should absolutely not have conceded. And let me tell you something. Al Gore as vice president, it's pretty hard for a vice president to do something really bad. But Al Gore did. When he was vice president, he was presiding over the Congress. And the Florida delegate, the Black Caucus,
Hmm.
wanted to exert a congressional challenge against the Electoral College delegation for Florida, which was perfectly within their right. And Al Gore refused to allow it to happen. He disrespected the Black Caucus and just caved in. And the Florida delegation to the
Hmm.
Electoral College was completely illegitimate. And yet he, the candidate
Right.
for president, as vice president, killed it. Absolutely inexcusable. And in the last 20 years, he has never challenged in any meaningful way the continued existence of the Electoral College, and has done precious little, if anything, to protect our
Hmm.
election. But
Yeah.
he and John Kerry and Hillary Clinton should be there publicly stating that Joe Biden, actually Hillary Clinton has said now that Biden should not concede. And but
Yeah.
you trust the
So,
Democrats? No.
well, you're getting pushback from some people on the thread saying it's absurd to say that corporate Dems would be more comfortable with Trump than Bernie Sanders.
They proved it in 2016. Hillary Clinton would have won that election if she had chosen Bernie as a vice president, or even if she had treated Bernie and the movement that was behind him with more respect. I mean, I have a lot of friends who were at the Philadelphia convention in 2016, and they were trashed by the corporate Democrats. I experienced that firsthand in 1968 at the Chicago convention when I was an anti-war demonstrator, and we were trashed by the Democrats. But absolutely, the Democratic Party hates the left far more than they hate the right. Whenever they talk about bipartisanship among the Democrats, it's always with the Republicans. It's never with the Greens. So, I welcome your disagreement, but that's my opinion.
Okay. Well, why don't we move on to this? I mean, I think we could debate that all day. I mean, I think I was part of the Bernie Sanders movement in 2016, and I could see some of what you're saying, but I also feel like I think people were hell bent on winning. They just didn't have the right strategy. I think they really wanted
the right strategy. The strategy that they came up with in 2015, and I'm sure I'll get some response here, was to denounce the left and move as far right as they could, and they're doing it again. How much time did the Republicans at the Democratic convention get to speak? All four of them, and I know one of them. I know John Kasich. How many Republicans spoke for how long as opposed to AOC at the Democratic convention? I think this is a mistake because this election will be decided by young people. It's not going to be those marginal Republicans who despise Donald Trump, and thankfully there are plenty of them, but it's how many young people come out and how many of them work the polls. I'm 74, so that's not me. But we need the people who marched for George Floyd and for police reform to now march to the voting election polls and vote and be poll workers.
Yeah, I mean, okay. So my guess is because I supported Warren during the primary this year, and I kept holding out hope that Warren would be chosen as the running mate. But
I have to say, I totally wanted. I think Elizabeth Warren would make a great president. I'm not as comfortable with Kamala Harris, but politically and culturally, there's no doubt that she was the right choice.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is, I think that they're playing chess, and they're betting money on voters, reliable voters who vote. They may not vote for Democrats, but they're reliable voters. Instead of trying to court unreliable voters, young people, and progressives. So I think that they decided to go with the people in the middle who are reliable voters.
You got to do both. And
yeah.
the young voters, we have to make them reliable voters. If you look at the map, I have a history of the United States coming out, which I hope you'll read. I emailed it to you. And it's a whole history of the United States. And I was going to publish it, but how do you publish a history of the United States unless you know what happens this year? So I've been sitting on it. But in it, the vote, somebody did an electoral college vote if only people younger than 30 had voted in 2016. And Hillary just, had over 400 electoral votes. So they may or may not be reliable voters, but young people in this country are hugely opposed to Trump far
Mhm.
more than any other demographic. And getting them to the polls is critical. And getting them to work at the polls is critical. You know, we're in the middle of
Right.
a demographic shift. Historically, the polls have been worked by old people,
Right.
you know, retired people. But this year,
Right.
they're not going to come out, and the election boards are desperate for young people to come work the polls, and I hope they do.
Hmm.
People,
Well, you know what I would like, because I kind of straddle. I feel like you know, in terms of policy, I'm a Bernie, hard left Democrat. But this year, my fantasy is that we put aside our grievances and just work really hard on making sure that we remove Trump.
oh,
And
I think that's
yeah,
happening. But you have
uh-huh.
to get the young people out. You have to get people under 30 to vote now and to work the polls
Oh yeah,
because
I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just kind of going back to the discussion about your criticism of the Democratic Party and corporate Democrats. So I'm just saying, like, what if we just kind of really figured out a way to all work together to make sure that Trump,
well, Biden
is
Biden
removed.
has been
Uh-huh,
far more
uh-huh.
sorry,
Go
Biden
ahead.
has been far more receptive to
Hmm.
Bernie than Hillary was, and
Yeah.
that's Hillary's been attacking Bernie for not campaigning for her. Bernie campaigned a lot harder than she did in a lot of places, including Wisconsin, and he's doing it again. It's a little different with the virus, but the left is well aware of the fact that Donald Trump is the American Hitler. I mean, I'm Jewish. I'm a historian. I understand what Trump is, and the only difference between Trump and Hitler is that Hitler spoke better German. And these two guys have exactly the same value system, total lack of compassion and empathy, completely
Okay.
dishonest and dishonorable, violent people.
Hmm.
And so there are no illusions here. And I'm more
Okay.
than happy to work with the Democrats. I wish they would be a little more open to working with us.
Okay. So question, what happens kind of there are two worst case scenarios. One is Trump stages something like a coup d'etat. The other scenario is Trump actually wins the electoral college legitimately.
Well, that's the ultimate nightmare. That's
Yeah,
the
they're both bad.
we have to prevent. If he
Right.
wins the popular vote or the legitimately wins the electoral college, then then we're in a corner. That's why the number one priority is to protect the election. We can talk all we want about what he does after the election, but 99% of it at this point is to make sure he doesn't win it.
Right.
If he wins it,
But if
it's all
if
mute.
but let's say he does stage a coup, right? He
Well,
refuses to
let's
go.
say first that he loses the election. That's number one.
Uh-huh.
Number one has to be that he loses the election.
Yeah,
Without him losing the election, we have no leg to stand on.
okay, but let's say he loses the election, but he stages something like a coup.
Then we have to have a general strike.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
people have to refuse to go to work until he leaves.
Hmm.
Everything has to shut down, except the
Hmm.
hospitals, food services, stuff like that. But
And is that being coordinated? Like, have you been
people
talking
are
to other?
talking about it. People
Yeah.
love to talk about it. I mean, but the nitty gritty of protecting election is not quite as much fun.
Hmm.
But number, it's all if he wins the election, it's over.
Hmm.
There's no resistance. There's no basis for resistance.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. I mean, do you think that you know, there is a way that just all of us right now can just put aside some of our political differences and agree, okay, if this happens, we're all going to participate in a general work strike
That would be
and
great.
and just get buy-in from the public.
I would love to have that in the list of things that we can do on the left. I mean, if we
Hmm.
could have had a general strike to stop the war in Vietnam
Mhm.
or the war in Iraq, that would have been wonderful. And maybe we
Yeah.
can stop the next war. Maybe if Biden wins and then, God forbid, decides to take us into war like Lyndon Johnson did,
Mhm.
maybe we can stop that.
Mhm.
It'd be wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm just encouraged by some of the things I'm seeing in professional sports with people um, canceling games. I mean,
That was
um,
great. What the Milwaukee Bucks did was fantastic. That was
yeah, I mean, I think that's a very interesting model.
yeah.
I mean, that's unexpected, and that just kind of people walking out, I think would be extraordinarily powerful. And that to me is a better way to organize than trying to get people out on the street where there is going to be a violent standoff
Right.
with
There will
Trump.
not be one. There will not be a revolution in the streets in this country. It'll be in
Yeah.
the tweets, not the streets. And it'll happen when the powers that be understand that they can't run a country without people who are with people who are unwilling to go to work.
Hmm. Yeah, I
So
like that.
yeah,
No, I
that's
think that's a
that's
really
the
good idea.
that's the
That's
way.
a really good idea. And I would love to see if we can kind of spread that idea around, get prepared, get people mentally prepared that it may have to come to that, right? And yeah, and I
Well, we
love
could
the
practice. We
uh,
could practice on November 2nd and 3rd.
hmm
November 2nd and 3rd should be national holidays.
hmm
Where nobody goes to work and everybody goes to the election, to the polls.
hmm
Certainly November 3rd. In fact, a lot of corporations are giving people the day off on November 3rd, giving a
yeah,
paid day off. So it should be
right.
November 2nd and 3rd.
Hmm.
And then if Trump refuses and loses and refuses to leave office, it should be the 4th, 5th, and 6th. You know, so
Right.
that's the way it should happen.
I
But
guess,
nothing happens
well,
unless
you know,
you win the election.
so what I'm finding that something that's interesting that's happened is because people don't trust politicians and the media, they're following athletes and coaches and professional sports teams. So I mean, so I feel like there's a kind of an area of leadership there, like what
Yeah.
LeBron James is doing right now to protect the election is another example of this. And so I don't know, I'm just wondering, like, if there are conversations that can be had with the professional athletes that are taking the lead on protecting democracy, see, get them on board with this idea of a general strike, because I think that would actually be very powerful and much better than just saying get out on the streets, because I think that would actually help Trump.
Yes, it's not going to be one in the streets, as I said, and the athletes have shown themselves to be extremely aware, and Colin Kaepernick
Hmm.
has done a great thing. LeBron
Hmm.
is a stand-up guy. Not only is he's as great an athlete as we've ever seen in this country, but he's completely scandal-free. A
Right.
family man, a real mensch, very well-spoken,
Hmm.
um, uh, extremely intelligent.
Mensch.
Mensch, yeah, right. It's a Korean word. Um, so the athletes have been fabulous, and there is
Yeah.
a history of this. Going back, Paul Robeson was a great athlete. Jackie Robinson, Althea
Hmm.
Gibson.
Yeah.
The two guys at the '68 Olympics, Muhammad
Hmm.
Ali. These are really important people, and
Have you
and
been in touch with any of the athletes like LeBron James and
he's involved. I haven't met him. I haven't,
hmm
but he doesn't need me.
uh-huh.
He's been doing great work.
Well, but what I mean is, like, specifically about the idea of a work strike. If let's say LeBron James says we need a work strike to stop Trump's takeover of our democracy, I think that would actually be very
Huge.
powerful.
It'll be huge.
Yeah, it would be huge.
And,
Yeah.
uh, and if he did it, and Steph Curry, and
Hmm.
um, you know Steve Nash, and I mean,
Right.
it would be a great thing, and it would
Okay.
have a huge impact. And
Okay.
then if they do it,
I mean, okay, so I have another question for you.
yeah.
So there are people who are saying, I really hate the Democratic Party. I live in Wisconsin. I'm not going to vote for the Democratic Party because of what they're doing to the Green Party. Is there, what would be your message to them? People who are like opting to stay
You
home.
gotta vote for Biden, unfortunately. You just have to do
Mhm,
it. It's especially in the swing states. You
mhm,
got to hold your nose and do it. And listen, Biden is 77. Okay, I'm 74. I know what it's like to be in your 70s. The the likelihood that Kamala Harris will become president is extremely high, and we need a female in the White House.
mhm,
That's a big part of the shift.
mhm,
The American public has been. We now have had a black president, an African American president, and okay, the big and I actually heard this from Shirley Chisholm. Shirley Chisholm, the first woman, the serious candidate, first African American woman to run for president. Somebody asked her, "Did you experience more pushback from being black or being a woman?" And she instantly said, "Oh, by far from being a woman."
mhm,
That's the line that this country really has to cross. We have to
mhm,
have a female in the White House. I do not believe that Joe Biden is going to go a full 4 years. I just hope he goes a full 4 months, for God's sakes, to get inaugurated. So the choice of Kamala Harris really changes everything. To have a woman of color as president, that's the big line. And so anybody, you want to get on your high horse and not vote for Biden, come on. You're actually also voting for Kamala Harris, and that is a huge deal. Now, politically, I'm not that comfortable with her. I'm much more like you, comfortable with
mhm,
Elizabeth Warren or maybe Congresswoman Bass, or I'd love to
mhm.
see Barbara Lee in the White House. But she's what we got, Kamala Harris, and the bottom line is, look, we're looking at Hitler here. I mean,
Right.
Donald Trump is Hitler, and
Mhm,
you can say that. And a lot of his followers love the fact that he's like Hitler. It's not just us on the left calling him Hitler; it's his people calling him Hitler. We've all seen that rally where they started yelling "Heil Trump." I mean, and in Ohio, when the right wingers resisted wearing a mask, they painted a swastika on the
right.
state house. What is that about? And the woman, the woman who was Secretary of Health in Ohio, who was who's called for the moratorium and mandated mask wearing. She was Jewish, and she lived down the street from me in Columbus. I don't know her, but she's my neighbor, within a half mile. And the Nazis came out to her house. I mean, this is Germany, 1933, and she had to resign.
Mhm,
There were
right.
swastikas everywhere. So don't tell me Trump's not Hitler. So yeah, you don't want to vote for Joe Biden. It's all well and good. Let me just say hi to my wife real quick.
Okay.
Hi, honey. I'm on a great Zoom call. Can I call you back in about 20 minutes? Okay, okay. So, uh, no, I'm sorry. I'm a green. I'm a no nuker. I have had more than my share of issues with the Democratic Party. My whole
Right.
book, The People's Spiral of U.S. History, um, since Bill Clinton especially. Well,
Right.
I think that the worst president in U.S. history is not Donald Trump. Give him a second term, he will be. But the worst president in U.S. history was a Democrat, and that's Woodrow Wilson. And the second
Mhm,
worst was also a Democrat. That's Andrew Jackson. So the Democrats, I got plenty of issues with, but I will vote for Joe Biden this year. So I urge
mhm.
all people to do so as well.
Okay. Okay, well that's good to hear because my heart sinks when some of my fellow, burners say I cannot stomach voting for Biden. And I just can't say, I don't know, I just don't have a
You,
response anymore.
you
You
especially in Pennsylvania. Just then tell them to vote for Kamala Harris. Tell them to vote for a woman of color becoming president.
Hmm.
She will.
Right.
I'll bet you the Vegas odds. If Biden is elected, uh,
Right.
pray God, I'll bet you the Vegas odds on him going
Hmm.
4 years are less than 50. So, really. She
Right.
will be president if he wins.
Yeah, I mean, another thing I find troubling is that the right is very focused on Supreme Court appointments. So they're not just voting for Trump, they're voting for, you know, Kavanaugh and Gorsuch and, all
Right.
the Supreme Court justices. And for some reason, like the left doesn't think that strategically. It's like very much about these two individuals as opposed to all the political appointments, all the Supreme Court appointments.
Well, I
And
think a lot of
yeah.
us get it. Every night I pray for Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I mean,
Yeah.
God help us. She's just got he's got to stay there, as long as we can. And I think that Biden and Kamala Harris will put good people on the Supreme Court. Certainly, people
Yeah.
of females. So there you
Right.
go.
So I do have a comment from somebody that's hashtagging still Sanders, too disappointed and disgusted to care what Debs do anymore. I mean, I think there's sort of legitimate like PTSD from 2016. Like people just feel so wounded about what happened still. And I was kind of in the middle of all that. So I was there with seeing people's heartbreak. But I don't
But
know.
Joe,
Do you have any?
Norman Solon's doing a lot of good writing about that at Reader Supported News. Vote for Biden, but be ready to oppose him when he's in the White House. But
Mhm.
look, you cannot. Donald Trump is a criminal psychopath. He's a
Mhm.
mobster. He's a very, very sick person. He has zero compassion or empathy. Couldn't care less about anything. He doesn't get it. That's the real takeaway from these remarks he made about the military.
Mhm.
It's not just that he's a moron when it comes to military service. What he doesn't get is the idea of empathy or compassion. They're
Yeah.
not part of it. There is a part of the human race, if these people are actually human, that is completely devoid of compassion or empathy.
Mhm.
And that's where he's coming from.
Mhm.
Even Nixon and Reagan and they all had some sense of compassion, but
Right.
Trump has none.
Mhm.
He is a mutant and
Mhm.
beyond dangerous. So and Biden, to
Right.
his credit, has reached out to a certain extent to Bernie and to the left, and at least they figured that much out. Hillary,
Mhm.
and so there we go.
Mhm.
You wanna
Right.
be wounded and wait till Trump gets a second term, then you'll really be wounded. I can tell you that the
Right.
first thing that Hitler did was send people like us to Dachau and then to Auschwitz. And
Mhm.
you people who, have all these issues, I guarantee you, I can give you a much better, deeper rap against the Democratic Party than you can, because I'm a historian and I've been studying it. And Bill Clinton was one of the very worst presidents we've ever had. He did nothing, accomplished nothing in his 2 terms except to instigate a national debate on oral sex. That was his principal accomplishment. And, he was terrible. Obama was only slightly better. Obama at least did the ACA and a couple of other things.
Okay.
But I can go you toe to toe for as many hours as you want on how bad the Democratic Party is, but we cannot stand Trump in there. That's the end of everything,
End of the world. So
certainly as we know it.
yeah. So let me ask you this. Let's see. I would love to get people engaged in a constructive conversation about how to protect this election and assume that we're going to have lawsuits and battles like beyond November 3rd. So people have to be ready to organize. How do we get more people involved in that constructive conversation? You've been having these Zoom calls, right?
Right.
How do we scale it so that we get
Social media.
thousands more people involved?
I'm too old to do it. The high point, I have 5 daughters and more than 10 grandchildren. And the high point of our family reunions is when I try to work my iPhone. everybody thinks that's the funniest thing they ever saw. But we have to work social media.
Mhm.
And the way Trump won in 2016 or got the presidency, and the way they're doing it now is through social media. And people like you who are experts in this, it's got to go with social media. We got CNN and MSNBC, and they're trying every day and this and that. But your generation, people under 30, people under 70, for God's sakes, you got to work Facebook and Twitter and I can't even name them. Instagram, and I have never done an Instagram. I couldn't even begin to use TikTok. I do have a Facebook page with probably 5,000 people on it, but I don't know what to do with it. I
Right.
post my stuff on it. So that
Okay.
it's got getting people involved, and you have to explain to people how bad Trump really is. I mean, people
Yeah.
have to understand this is the end of the world as we know it.
I think it overwhelms people. I feel there's just, there's only so much negativity they can take.
But that's by design. That's the Russians are the masters of that, and Trump is the master. Trump overwhelms people because every day his goal every morning is to do something even more outrageous than the day before.
Yeah.
So that the whole media is about him.
Yeah.
When
So
the last 4 years has there been a news cycle?
Yeah.
It didn't start with this jerk, right? That's his goal.
Yeah. So there's a enormous fatigue factor. That people just are so done. They're so sick of the election. They're so sick of politics.
I'm sorry. There's no excusing.
I
can't accommodate that. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I just can't pay attention. Well, when you're at death camp, maybe you'll pay attention. when the next plague comes, you'll pay attention. We have death camps in this country. The whole prison system is a death camp, and we have Bill Clinton to thank for a lot of that. But these camps at the border, someday we're going to really see what's going on there. I mean, we are murdering children every day. Is that okay with you? Are you fatigued by all that? I mean, come on, get real here.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. So let's see. Let's do this. I want to help you with the social media part of it and figure out how we can get more people engaged,
Absolutely. And come to the Zoom calls. There are literally dozens of organizations, including many in Pennsylvania, that are working on this.
Yeah.
You want to pick a good one. If you're not going to, you need to be a poll worker in a swing state. If you're not going to, and actually you cannot, in many cases, you can't go into swing states and work in the polls. You can be outside and protect the votes, the voters, but you can't go in unless. So if you're in a precinct in a swing state like Pennsylvania, become a poll worker. You actually get paid up to $20 an hour in some places.
Yeah, I signed up for that.
Well, good for you. But you got to wear a mask. By the way, I sniff garlic. I think that the virus doesn't like garlic, so I put on my mask and then I sniff minced garlic through it helps with social distancing also. So, but be a poll worker, sign up for the various election protection. If you get a paper ballot, walk it in, mail it in, be sure to vote, be sure to check your registration rolls, work the phones. Some people are going door to door, by the way. So, do that. But this whole idea, I'm so sick of it, forget about it. You don't have that right. I mean, you do have the right, but you don't have the luxury. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. So this is a moral call to action, not just political. Like we have to say.
I mean, I mean,
Yeah.
you want to survive. You want to have a planet to live on. You think these fires in California aren't going to be everywhere?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, let's forget it. Forget about it. It's very real.
Right. Okay, Harvey, I really appreciate this conversation. I will be on the call on Monday.
Good. And bring as many
And
people as you can onto it.
yeah, and I'm gonna try to help out with scaling so that we can engage more people in election protection. Let's do it.
All right, Annabelle, thank you. You're wonderful. Keep in touch, and let's talk later about
Hmm.
stuff we can do together.
Anytime.
Okay.
Always a text away. You can just
Thank you.
text away. Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll be
Okay.
in touch. No
Tell
news.
your wife I said hello.
Yeah. And no more stolen elections.
No more stolen elections. All right.
Take care. Bye
Bye.
bye.
All right. Well, thank you for joining, everybody. Let's see. I put links to Harvey's group, and you can sign up for the Zoom calls. Yeah, let's all work together to make sure that Trump doesn't steal the election. We are going to have differences, okay? But there's just one cause right now. The cause is we've got to protect the election. We have to remove Trump from the White House. And then we can argue about whether or not corporate Dems have done this or that, or who's the worst president, or if Hillary was terrible to Bernie, or whatnot. We have plenty of time to argue all those things and try to address the underlying problems, but we've got to remove Trump. So let's figure out how to work together. Okay. Thank you so much, everybody. Until next time. Bye.
You've been listening to Conversations About a Way Forward from Count Me In to Win and The Talk on Main Street. To learn more, find us on Facebook at The Talk on Main Street.